My name is Cam Anderson. I'm the owner and sole employee of Blacktail Studio. I wish I could say, I grew up as a 10th generation, craftsman, but I used to be a pilot. I was a helicopter pilot for 10 years, and one of the best things about being a pilot is we have a great schedule. So I work 7 days on, I work 7 12-hour shifts, and I had 7 days off. And we moved into a house with a big garage, and I needed something to fill that garage, and I needed something to fill my time. So I started dabbling with woodworking, and it was a pretty slippery slope, and it kind of led to where we are today. I don't know that anything sets me apart. I feel like anything in woodworking can be replicated by someone else. The reason I've had a little more success, like on YouTube, I just think I can tell a good story. I have the ability to take the time to film something properly and make it a little bit more interesting, whereas if you're a big production wood shop, it can be really hard to slow everything down and do that. So I think I just take a little bit more time on some of the social media aspect and work on being honest and relatable and show my mistakes and all those things that happen to everybody, but a lot of us don't like to show. And I know early on I didn't like showing it either because it's embarrassing, but the more I show, the more people seem to resonate with it. This is I need to go look because people keep asking me and I need to know the exact date. I think it was 2018, mid 2018 when I put my first video up, and not long after that, I think I did a couple of videos. They were okay, and I did my first epoxy table build. Didn't take very long before I was at a couple million views, and that was when I went from 400 subscribers to 20,000 or something like that, which was kind of that first indication that, well, there might be something with this YouTube thing. I have a little bit over 100, I think 103 or so, 105, somewhere in there. It's varied over the years. When I first started, I remember I bought a slab off Craigslist, and the guy, is this guy backyard dealer, and it was a really good deal, which I learned why in a little while. But I took it to this local woodworking shop that had a big planer and did surface it for me. And the guy ran it through the planer, and he's kind of looking at it funny, and he touches it. And I don't know at the time why he's touching it, but the reason he's touching it is because it's cold. And cold, as I learned, means wet. And he's kind of staring at it, and he says, "This wood's pretty wet." And he grabs his moisture meter and he puts it on there, and he says, "This is it's over 30%. And I was like, "Oh yeah, what's that mean?" And he says, it's not dry yet." I was like, "Gotcha, yeah." "What?" And he's like, "Wood needs to be dry to work with." And I was like, "Oh, so what now?" And he's like, "Maybe let it sit for a few months or a year or two." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So that was my first lesson into woodworking of like, oh, you can't just cut wood off a tree and put it in your living room. So that was my first lesson with wet wood. I also had a really big, beautiful walnut slab. It was like 60 inches wide. I bought it for $250. I thought I stole it. And spoiler, I still have that slab today. I'm having a company that's still trying to get it dry because it had trapped moisture. It had been sitting outside and kind of got, I can't remember the term, case hardened, where the moisture gets trapped inside, and basically made it unusable. So it's one of those, I thought I got a good deal, but then, here I am 6-7 years later and still haven't been able to use it. So, wet wood was one I really had some problems with early on. And now I have a good moisture meter, so now I keep it in my truck. So whenever I see a roadside sale, I can test it and I can know if that wood is safe or not. And that was one that was kind of plagued me for a couple of years, but lessons learned. That's a great question. I found people pay way more for it. I would love to make just what I want to make, and then if someone wants to buy it, great. But pretty early on I found I could sell things for about twice as much if I was to make something custom for someone's space versus just making an item and hoping it sells. Another problem, if you say make 5 items and you put them up for sale at your whatever price, even if it's that half price, now someone's gonna want something custom but similar to that one at the same price. So they'll go, "I want one just like that, a little bit narrower and a little bit longer," and they expect it to be the same price. And so when you tell them, "Oh no, it's twice as much," then they don't really like to hear that. So I found if I only custom make things and I don't have to have that low priced inventory, then I can really get the highest price for my products. People think that they're all just super rich people. My tables run from 10 to 30,000, sometimes more. And you're obviously gonna be pretty well off if you're spending that amount, but I do have people that have houses that you would not, if you drove by it, you would not think that person has a $10,000, $20,000 table in there. Some people just really like custom made things. They like having something that they're a part of the process. My customers help me choose the wood, and they help me choose the layout, and they choose the legs, and they're involved in the whole process. So I was pretty surprised that, you know, call it upper middle class, a lot of those, as well as a lot of the, you know, very wealthy people. So this stack of wood here was from the burn bin at Gobi Walnut. They're a wood supplier local to me, and it's not the nicest stuff, hence the fact that they were gonna burn it. And I've done a little bit of power carving stuff where I'll cut squares, stack them up, and then carve them into like a table base. And that's the idea for these. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. And you can see I have a bunch more. Those are some nicer wood down on that end, but just have the hardest time throwing stuff away. And again, part of the shop renovation 2.0 is gonna be really choosing what I want and what I need versus, you know, just hoarding everything. You know, that's another thing that I am not the best at. I know a lot of companies that will have a price per square foot of a table, and they can multiply it, you know, a table up to 6 feet is this much per square feet, from 6 to 8 feet it's this much, and you know, 12 feet it's this much. I don't. I have a little different model on my pricing, and it started from when I first started doing this, because I've always been a one-man shop. All I do is I charge as much as I can, where I won't be disappointed if the client says no. And you might need me to explain that a little bit more. If I was backed up for 6 months, or say, you know, 6 or 8 months backed up, and another order came in and it was something I didn't really want to build, I just say, you know, I don't care if I get that or not, I still have all these orders to do, maybe I'll charge a little bit more this time. And conversely, if there's a new project, or maybe I'm almost caught up with all my orders, then I would say, oh, that's a really cool project, I really want to do that. I'm going to give them as aggressive of a price as I can, because I'd love it for my portfolio, I think it'd be fun to build, I think it'll make a great YouTube video, any of those. And if they say no, I couldn't really do it for any less anyway. It's actually really enabled me to scale, whereas I get a lot of money for my tables now, and I would have never had the guts to do that if I was doing a set pricing model. Is I was able to just raise it a little bit and a little bit more and a little bit more, and it's been great for me. It might not apply to everybody, but that's just how I do it. One of my favorite projects, maybe, I think I actually titled the YouTube video the best thing I ever made, so I suppose that should qualify. I'd wanted to build us a dining table for years, and our last house was significantly smaller, and my wife's like, you can't build us our forever table because it's going to be too big for the space, and we don't want to build a forever table that's too small. So I built us a big book-matched black walnut table, and my wife likes to entertain, so the main table itself is 9 feet long, but we wanted it to be able to expand. And so for me, I had to get really creative and try to find a way to make extension wings on the end of the table that didn't involve a bunch of hardware and things that I could add on myself. So what I did is I took a 12-foot slab and I cut the ends off, and I had some kind of hidden hardware so the extensions could slide on. When you take them off, you can't see anything there. And that was hard for me to engineer and hard for me to design, especially to make it strong enough. And there was some hiccups along the way, but it was a really, really challenging build. And in the end, everything worked out. And we actually just had a Passover dinner with all of her family over. And I hadn't put the wings on in like 6 months, and I added them on. They still fit, and it worked great. So that was probably my favorite thing that I've done so far. So the most expensive piece of wood that I've bought so far, I actually haven't finished the project for, because I had to buy it while it was green, so that wood is drying right now. That was 2 slabs that are going to be 1 table, I believe combined. I think they were like $9,000 and $8,000, something like that. Somewhere around $12,000 to $15,000. I'd have to look. $12,000 to $15,000 for the wood just for 1 table. So that's by far the most I've ever spent for one individual project. Yeah, people ask me all the time if you get nervous when you have a really expensive piece of wood, and I don't really get nervous anymore. It doesn't mean I can't screw something up, but no, I'm more excited to see the project come together, and I think that one is going to be a pretty cool one. That one's already sold. I'm not allowed to say, but it's sold for $32,000, I believe, is the price prior to shipping, with the legs, completed table, all that, but not including freight. Yes. And you asked me about pricing earlier, and one of the first things someone told me is if you're completely stumped on pricing, a lot of people use the 3 times material cost, and I don't even think that's 3 times material cost. So that's, again, that was one of those prices I was a little bit more aggressive on. Even if it's over $30,000, it's still, you know, not even the 3 times material cost. Off the top of my head, I don't know the most expensive slab, but you know, built many tables with, you know, $2,000 and $3,000, maybe $4,000 slabs. Those have ranged, you know, my prices are a little bit more expensive now, so those ones were probably a little less in the, you know, the $15,000 to $20,000 range. And I've had single tables that I've had $3,000 of epoxy in. you know, which is a crazy amount of money just for the epoxy in one table. Table legs usually aren't too bad, you know. I'll routinely spend, you know, $1,000 on those, and sometimes less, but sometimes more. Sure. I talked about this in one of my videos. Is one of the reasons why I don't like the 3 times material price structure is you're almost encouraged to gouge the customer on more expensive wood, because now you get a charge. Now you make more with, you know, it could be the same amount of work. And I had built a desk that I'd had a slab, and I'd had it for a couple of years. It was just a really cool, really interesting slab, but it was really kind of funky. It was a orchard walnut slab, which the orchard stuff seems to grow really weird. And I bought it for $200 because I was up at my wood supplier, and he's like, oh, all these are $200 a piece. And I was like, okay. And I grabbed it, and I ended up selling that desk for $7,000. And I talked about it in the video a little bit, where I was like, hey, what do you guys think? Is this fair, or is this, you know, BS for me to charge so much for this? But it was a lot more work, and it was also a really rare slab. So I think you should charge what the project's worth, not what the project costs you to make. Yeah, I'd built a round table, and I'd wanted to do a walnut with white epoxy. That was kind of an interesting look that not a lot of people were doing at the time. This a couple years ago. So I built this table, and this is one that wasn't for a customer. So I built it and just put it for sale. And I had a really nice lady reached out and said I'd love it, and she lived in Hawaii. So I shipped it to Hawaii, and about a year later, I didn't really hear much from her, because I knew she didn't live there. She was traveling, so I was gonna go and kind of basically wait at her apartment for her, her condo for her. About a year later, I'm on a walk with my wife, and I see like a Honolulu phone number. And I get so few phone calls, I almost like kind of suspect who it could be. I'm like, I don't know that many Hawaii people. Hello? And she's like, hey, this is so-and-so about the table. I'm like, oh, hey. And she goes, hey, we finally got here. They had opened it, been in a box the whole time. And she goes, and we just opened it, and it looks really, and I go, did it yellow? And she's like, yeah. And this beautiful white turned to just a nasty yellow. And I had since kind of suspected and hoped that that wasn't going to be the case, but I had some smaller pieces that had turned, you know, kind of yellow slightly, not as bad as hers. And I just said, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. What can I do to make it right? Do you want your money back? Do you want another table? What do you want? And she goes, oh no, I just would really like a table. And I was like, well, I've since learned, I don't think we should do a white one. Do you want a different color? So she said, yeah, that'd be great. And then the next day she called and goes, we actually need a dining table too. And so she bought, at the time, it was a $10,000 dining table, because I treated her right. And I could have told her it's been a year, it's not my fault, whatever, but she was right. It was I completely messed up. It was unacceptable, and I would expect the same service if I had bought something like that. And so made it right, and then she ended up rewarding me with a big order.